Look up tonight and you'll see one moon, pale and quiet. Now imagine a second light climbing over the opposite horizon, right next to it. You've probably looked at the real one 1,000 times without wondering what happens if there's a second. This isn't a Star Wars double sunset or a fantasy detail. It's an actual second moon in orbit around Earth right now, tonight, hanging beside the one you know. The short version: the tides turn violent, coastlines get redrawn, and evolution takes a hard left turn. A few 100 million years from now, this second moon and our current one collide, in full view of everyone. We'll get to that collision. First, is any of this even possible? This isn't science fiction. Astrophysicist Neil Cummins modeled exactly this in a 2010 book, and the mechanism has a name: orbital capture. Early in a planet's life, a stray, rocky body wanders close enough to get caught by its gravity, and instead of smashing in or drifting back into the dark, it settles into its own orbit. That's how you get a second moon. Having just one is actually the weird outcome. Mars has two moons. Jupiter has 95. Saturn's past 100. Earth, with its lonely single moon, is basically the one kid at the lunch table with no plus one. This is where it stops being abstract and starts being your street. Let's give this second moon a name: Luna B, half the size of our current moon, orbiting at half the distance, about 192,000 kilometers out instead of 384,000. That sounds like a small change. It isn't. You wake up on an ordinary Tuesday in Charleston, South Carolina, step outside with your coffee, and look toward the harbor. The water is gone. Not low tide, gone. Mud flats, a few beached boats lying on their sides, and some confused pelicans standing around like they'd also like an explanation. 8 hours later, it comes back, and it doesn't ease in. It surges up the channel into streets that have never flooded once in recorded history. The reason is simple: being twice as close roughly quadruples how hard that moon pulls on the ocean. Cummins puts the real number at 8 times our current tidal range. Right now, the Bay of Fundy in Canada hits 16 meters at its most extreme, and people fly in to see it as a natural wonder. On two moon Earth, 16 meters is just Tuesday. That leaves a real question: where do you build a city? Nobody builds at sea level anymore. Every coastal city becomes a cliff city, elevated, walled, fortress shaped, basically Santorini, except it's not an aesthetic choice. It's the building code, because the alternative is losing your ground floor twice a day. The coastline itself won't hold still either. Waves 8 times taller don't just look bigger, they hit with far more force behind each one. The white cliffs of Dover, which took the ocean millennia to carve, would be gone in centuries. The Maldives, already losing ground in our reality, wouldn't survive long enough to make it onto a map in this one. Some places that exist for us simply don't get to exist there, not because of war or politics, just because of where a rock happened to be sitting 4.5 billion years ago. The water gets worse, the sky changes too. Here's the one part of this that doesn't try to kill you. At night, the sky is unreal. Luna B moves fast enough that you can watch it cross the sky over a single evening, and the combined light from both moons runs about 5 times brighter than our current full moon. Bright enough to sit outside and read an actual book without a lamp. I would never go back inside. But darkness has always been a survival tool, and this sky basically deletes it. Every prey animal that evolved to hide in the dark now has nowhere to hide. Speed matters more than camouflage. Burrowing gets more popular, and predators lose the element of surprise. The smart ones start hunting in packs instead of alone, because you can't sneak up on anything when the sky is never really off. The animals had to get smarter because the night stopped giving them anywhere to hide. One more headache before the big one. The calendar becomes a disaster. Two lunar cycles run at once, one at roughly 29 and a half days, one closer to 10, so every culture that ever built a religion around the moon now has to build one around 2. Twice the gods, twice the myths, and one shared headache trying to force a calendar out of numbers that refuse to divide evenly. That's a lot of consequences for one extra rock, but we still owe you the collision from the beginning. Here it is. 3.8 centimeters a year. That's roughly how fast our real moon is drifting away from Earth right now. Slowly enough that it's never made headlines. Luna B, sitting closer, would drift away about twice as fast. Give that a few 100 million years, and the gap between the two moons starts closing. Once they get close enough, their orbits stop cooperating. They pull on each other, drag each other off course, and the whole system destabilizes. Then they collide, though not as an explosion. It's slower and stranger than that, a gradual merging, lava pouring into open space, debris raining down onto Earth, and what's left settling into a ring like Saturn's that spends the next several million years pulling itself back together into a single moon. Two moon Earth eventually becomes one moon Earth. It just has to survive an extinction level event to get there. Two Moon Earth is louder and wilder in almost every direction. Bigger tides, sharper evolution, richer mythology, more spectacular nights, and eventually it tears itself apart just to end up exactly where we already are. Our moon formed 4.5 billion years ago when a Mars sized object called Theia slammed into a very young Earth. Out of that collision came exactly one moon, sitting at exactly the distance that keeps our tides gentle and our seasons stable. Shift that impact angle slightly, and we could just as easily have ended up with two moons already on a collision course. We didn't. We got the boring version, one moon, patient and steady, just doing moon things. Next time you're outside at night, that's what you're actually looking at. Not a rival, not a countdown, just the right amount of moon. Tell me in the comments what you'd have named the second one. Luna B is a placeholder, and I refuse to let that stand.